Hello everyone! Today we're diving into a topic that's often tricky for landlords and property managers, the eviction process. More specifically, I'll be focusing on the laws in New Mexico. Ready to become an expert in eviction law? Let's get started. The New Mexico eviction process follows similar steps compared to other states, and they are: send a clear written notice, fill out the forms, serve the tenant, attend the trial, and wait for judgment. Don't hesitate to ask for legal advice from an attorney for more information on landlord-tenant rights. Get the guide to eviction laws on the go from DoorLoop's Landlord's Guide series. Click the link in the description. Eviction reasons: failure to pay rent or non-payment of rent. The most common reason for eviction is failure to pay rent. A landlord can evict a tenant for failing to pay the rent on time. Rent is considered late in New Mexico a day past its due. However, a grace period to extend the rent payment may be available if written in the lease or rental agreement. Before starting an eviction process in New Mexico, the landlord must give the tenant a 3-day notice to pay. This means the tenant has 3 days to pay rent. If they are unable to pay rent by the end of the 3 days, the landlord may proceed with the eviction process. Violation of the lease or rental agreement. A lease or rental agreement may vary from tenant to tenant. It contains the responsibilities of each party during the entire duration of a tenant's stay. A tenant may face eviction for violating the terms of the lease. Before a landlord can start filing for an eviction action, a landlord must provide a 7-day notice to comply, which gives the tenant 7 days to fix the issue, or else they may be evicted. In New Mexico, if the tenant was able to fix their violation on time, but commits it again within 6 months, the landlord may proceed with filing for eviction without giving the tenant a second notice. However, if the tenant is unable to fix their violation within the 7 days given by the first notice, the landlord may proceed with filing for an eviction. Material health or safety violation. New Mexico law takes into account the health, building, safety, and housing codes. If a tenant violates any of these codes, the landlord must first issue a 7-day notice to comply, which gives the tenant 7 days to fix their violation, or else they may be evicted. A material health safety code violation affects the well-being of the entire rental property and may cause some health issues. Conducting illegal activity. In the state of New Mexico, a tenant who has engaged in illegal activity within the property must be given a 3-day notice to quit. Tenants usually have no choice but to leave the property, or else they will have to deal with an eviction lawsuit. The eviction laws of New Mexico consider illegal activity as the substantial violation of the lease. It includes, but is not limited to, theft, violence, assault, and involvement in the creation, distribution, or consumption of a controlled substance. Non-renewal of lease after the end of the rental period. A New Mexico eviction process does not allow a landlord to evict a tenant without good cause. As long as the tenant does not violate any rules, they can stay until their rental period ends. However, if a tenant overstays their lease term without applying for a renewal, they can be evicted. But first, the landlord must provide the correct notice. It does not matter whether a tenant has a written lease or is a month-to-month tenant. They all receive a specific notice depending on their tenancy, which could either be a 7-day notice to quit or a 30-day notice to quit. For more information, click the link in the description. To download your very own New Mexico lease agreement, visit DoorLoop's forms page. Filing a complaint. After the landlord gives the tenant the appropriate eviction notice, they must file a legal complaint in the correct district court or magistrate court. Filing fees must also be paid, and they can raise as high as $132 in Bernalillo County. Steps to file a complaint. Proceed to the justice court the rental property belongs to. Fill out the forms to file the complaint. The landlord may need to provide their district zip code and pay the fees. Timeline. It takes about 3 to 30 days from the date the eviction notice was given to the tenant before a complaint can be filed. Notice to comply. Before filing for an eviction with the court, you need to issue the tenant a notice to comply. You can either download the free PDF or Word template, or complete a New Mexico eviction notice from here using a step-by-step wizard that guides you through the entire process to make sure you are submitting the legally correct notice. Keep in mind, the step-by-step wizard will ask you to pay a small fee at the end. It's a small price to pay to ensure legal compliance and protection. The last thing you want to do is go to court only to find out you did the first process incorrectly. Serving the tenant. The summons in the complaint is a court order that informs the tenant of the eviction lawsuit filed against them. It contains information such as the date and time of the court trial. New Mexico allows individuals who are uninvolved in the case who are at least 18 years old to serve the summons and complaint. They must be delivered at least 7 to 10 days before the eviction hearing. How to give the tenant the documents. Any one of these methods can be used to serve the tenant. Should one method fail, then the server must move on to the next one. The summons and complaint are served to the tenant in person. A copy of the summons and complaint is left where the tenant is found at present. The documents are mailed to the tenant. This requires a signed return receipt. A copy is left at the tenant's rental unit with someone residing with them who is at least 15 years old. When using the service, a copy should also be mailed to the tenant. In the event all the methods above fail, the following steps must be taken. A copy is left with the tenant's employer. The documents are mailed to the last known address, and a copy is mailed to the workplace of the tenant. After serving the summons and complaint, if the eviction hearing was filed in magistrate court and the service used was mailing, the defendant has to provide a return receipt within 23 days from its mailing date. Otherwise, another method of service has to be used. Either party can ask the court judge for the continuance that lasts no longer than 7 days to give each side time to look for legal aid, witness to testify, or evidence. Timeline. The court order must be served 7 to 10 days before the eviction hearing. A continuance of 7 days may be requested by either party. For a complete overview of New Mexico's landlord-tenant laws, visit DoorLoop's complete guide to the New Mexico landlord-tenant laws. Asking for possession. Filing a motion to obtain judgment and get a judgment for possession. Landlords have to provide a strong argument backed up by solid evidence against their tenants. Once the landlord wins the eviction lawsuit, the tenant can appeal the judgment. However, if the eviction process begins due to non-payment of rent, the tenant has to leave the property unless they are able to pay rent in full or establish an escrow account within 5 days from the date they filed for an appeal. Next procedure if the tenant disagreed and filed an answer. In New Mexico, the tenant is not required to file an answer with the court prior to the hearing. They only have to appear during the court hearing. However, they can do so if they choose. Should the tenant be unable to attend the hearing, the judge could issue a default judgment in favor of the landlord. This means that the tenant must move out of the rental property. Evidence shown during a court hearing includes, but is not limited to, copy of the deed and the lease or rental agreement, rent receipts, rent ledgers, bank statements, witness statements, and photo and video documentation of the violations committed by the tenant. Timeline. A hearing for evictions is scheduled 7 to 10 days after the tenant receives the summons. Getting possession. After the landlord wins the case and gets a writ of restitution. Provided the tenant does not appeal for reconsideration, the court judge will issue a writ of restitution after the court judge rules in the landlord's favor. The writ dictates that a tenant must move out of the rental unit or else they will be forcibly evicted. This could take either a few hours or a few days, but it can be issued immediately after the eviction hearing. The landlord must request for it to be issued. Move out process. In the state of New Mexico, the law enforcement officer must remove the tenant from the rental unit 3 to 7 days after the judgment is passed in favor of the landlord. The eviction laws of New Mexico state that any personal property left behind has to be kept by the landlord for at least 3 days before they can sell or dispose of the property. Timeline. The tenant is removed 3 to 7 days after the judgment is passed. New Mexico eviction process timeline. On average, it takes about 2 weeks to 7 weeks for a complete eviction process in the state of New Mexico. Showing evidence. A hearing for evictions is scheduled 7 to 10 days after the tenant receives the summons, regardless of the reason for eviction. How to keep good records. If the tenant disagrees with the eviction request and they reply to the court, it's important that you keep extremely good records of everything so you can provide proof to the judge and win your case. This part can make or break your entire eviction request in the event of a dispute. You can stay organized by keeping a physical trail. This gets very hard to search through, takes up a lot of storage space, and could get lost, damaged, stolen, or burnt in a fire. Scanning documents. Scan every document into your computer. Backups. Store and backup every file using Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, or any other option that you can quickly search through if you need to. And PMS. Use a property management software to save everything from lease agreements, signed documents, violations, emails, notes, invoices, payments, reminders, maintenance requests, pictures, videos, and anything else that can possibly be useful in a court case. This is used best when you also scan every document into your software. A great example is DoorLoop. Check it out. Evidence to show for not paying rent. If the tenant doesn't pay rent and they dispute that claim, it's important that you show the judge the following: your lease agreement, showing the terms of the agreement when rent is due and any penalties for late payment. All payments, showing all previous payments, how they were normally made, check, credit card, ACH, etc., and what date they were normally paid on. Any payment returns. If their check bounced, their bank account had insufficient funds, or they did a chargeback dispute on their credit card, show this to the judge. Also, show any fees your bank may have charged you and any penalties you are owed according to your lease agreement. And all messages. If you send your tenant automated or manual payment reminders by text, email, letter, or mail, it's important to show this as well. While it's usually not needed, it's still good to show that they were aware of the situation and were given time to cure and make payment. This is why having things physically present is better than in emails. Evidence to show for lease violations. If you're evicting the tenant for lease violations, for example, noise complaints, unauthorized pets, or property damages, it's important to show proof from any of the following methods. Security cameras. If you have a surveillance system that can show them committing the crime or lease violation, you can be confident that the court will decide in your favor. Video. If you didn't catch them in the act, the next best thing is to record a video with your phone of any damages or the lease violation. Pictures. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. In this case, a picture could be worth thousands of dollars. Even if you take a video, it's important to show the judge any pictures too, as it's usually easier to see by email or printed. And lease terms. It is vital to show that the tenant violated some part of the agreement. Don't worry if you don't have every single term spelled out in your rental agreement. If the violation is bad enough, it might not be needed to have it written. As a good practice though, start adding all of the potential reasons to evict a tenant into your agreement. And there you have it, a comprehensive overview of the eviction process in New Mexico. Remember, as landlords and property managers, it's crucial to understand these laws to ensure fair treatment of tenants and avoid legal issues. Knowledge is your best tool in handling these complex situations. Keep informed, act responsibly, and you'll maintain a healthy landlord-tenant relationship. Until next time, take care and stay tuned for more property management insights. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more content on property management. Also, don't forget to check out these videos. Thank you and have an amazing day.